Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights. Welcome back to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio. I am your host, Michael Clogs. We're going to hear from Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, as Congress passes a bipartisan $280 billion bill aimed at the challenging dominance of China in the semiconductor and chip manufacturing industries. The legislation is called the Chips and Science Act, which would provide $52 billion in subsidies and grants to domestic chip manufacturing industry and $100 billion towards technology and science investments, including $80 billion for Natural Sciences Foundation. It would also establish a 25% tax credit for investment in semiconductor manufacturing. The House of Representatives passed a bill in a 243, 187 to 1 vote that saw Republican lawmakers voting no, and 24 voting yes with the Democrats. And here is what the lawmakers had to say who voted against it, and they argued that it would place billions of dollars in taxpayer money in subsidies and taxes for an industry that does not deserve government handouts. And the legislation reflected a remarkable rare consistency in polarized Congress that really isn't seen often. Usually, we see things going back and forth. The Democrats want one thing one way, that the Republicans tend to vote against it. Here is one opinion, though. If we keep allowing government to keep creating laws and bills that regulate things, how much of science are they actually going to be regulating eventually, and how much of it is going to be done just because it needs to be there, regardless of money or economy, that the technology needs to be there in order for us, for instance, to start to curb back the fossil fuel industry, to reduce emissions towards climate change and climate crisis. How much of that science is going to be just simply regulated, where really good ideas could be eliminated because, well, there was a bill that knocked it out of contention? We need to be really careful about bills and laws that curb science. We need to keep keep our minds as a society open to science and open to new ideas rather than curbing ourselves away from them. So it's just something to think about as we listen to what Nancy Pelosi actually has to say in
Friday morning, such an action-packed week. We're very excited that yesterday we had a 60-vote margin and victory for the CHIPS bill. We had 100% voting from the Democratic side, and once we got to 218, a large number of the Republicans voting as well, which was encouraging because we always worked on this as a bipartisan bill. 6 of the bills, at least 6 of the bills in the package were Republican bills, and many of the others are bipartisan. It's very exciting. It's going to be transformative in terms of how it enables America to reassert itself as preeminent in the world. It's called the Chips and Science Act, and I'm very pleased with that because maybe more than a week or 10 days ago, it was just the CHIPS bill, and we have the having a case encouraging for it to go beyond chips, because chips are very important. Semiconductors are very important, but it's about the here and now as we go forward in the near future. The science part is about the future, and science, research, education, expanding the diversity and inclusion of many more people, making scientific decisions and learning about it and teaching us about it as well as doing so in every corner of the country. You know what it does? It lowers the cost for consumers. It creates 100,000 good-paying million jobs. Reduces U.S. dependence on foreign manufacture as it brings chip manufacturing home in the United States. Make it in America, which is a national security priority and economic necessity. Turbocharges American innovation, really powering our feeling of research and next generation technology. I want to salute Betty Bernice Johnson, the chair of the Science-Based and Technology Committee. She got much of, not all, but a good deal of her bipartisan legislation into the package, and thank you for the CHIPS piece of this, and very effectively, and as well as 100,000 prevailing wage jobs by the Scott, which you know, I think we're about all the members of our chairs who play such an important role, and all of our members who do so as well. I just want to tell you a couple more things about it. It ensures that CHIPS funding comes with strong guardrails against corporate profiteering. It secures provisions to diversify the innovation workforce so our best minds can pad our technologies of the future, and including legislation to drive decades of discovery. Important money, strong investments, National Science Foundation, Office of the Department of Energy, and NIST. And now I molded outside the backdrop of the Washington Monument. I tribute to our founders who were committed to the future. That's what this legislation is, and we send it on to the president. That's pretty exciting for us. I'm excited today because for a long time now I have wanted to reinstate the assault weapon ban. You weren't here, maybe you weren't even born when we did this in the 90s. It was hard, but it happened, and it saved lives. And I'm looking forward to having the passage of it this afternoon. When I talk about it on the floor this afternoon, I want to show a presentation of what some totally irresponsible people are putting out there about little children, toddlers, learning how to use an assault weapon. Smaller assault weapons, but a gun like mine. Small assault weapons, but getting their muscles ready to be able to use it. Is that sick? Really, we're hopeful that in the bill and assault weapon ban and the outcry for it in the country, I think the best most important thing to do is to have background check. That's probably saves the most lives on the bone. But a very COVID that very important is to reinstate. We like to say reinstate because we did pass this thing, and it did save lives. We take an oath of office to protect and defend. Protect and defend people in America, people making our communities safe. And Democrats are committed to having strong support for our law enforcement and our first responders. I'm so proud to announce that as of late last night, we've come to terms in terms of how we support our law enforcement and do so with accountability. I have to pay tribute to Joyce Beatty, the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, to Josh Gottheimer, who really has been a leader on this issue, and Abigail Spanberger, she had chaired Bill 2. They found a way to do what we want to support our men and women in uniform, but to also do so with accountability. Since we talked about a security package, we've been flooded with so many bills that people have, so we need to, we have to have the bandwidth to deal with all of them, and hopefully, we plan to bring those support for men and women in law enforcement with accountability to the floor in the second week of August. That is comply with conform, and then the Senate may be ready to send us the very important legislation entitled the Inflation Reduction Act. We're very excited about the fact that we have a breakthrough there. It isn't everything new. How many times have I said that? Cannot judge something for what it doesn't do, but respect it for what it does. And what this does do is quite remarkable in terms of our investment in protecting the planet. It lowers, in addition to which it lowers healthcare costs with the subsidies that are extended for 3 years in the bill, and as well as to have, for the first time, historic opportunity for the Secretary of HHS to negotiate the lower prescription drug prices. Prescription drug, the cost of prescription drug is a kitchen table issue in the budget. And this legislation will reduce that cost, but also give people hope and part of a lower cost of the same. Safer communities, lower cost. Again, in this legislation to look for public safety bill, but at the time when we from the Senate. And that inflation reduction package, you know what it is, lowers costs of health care convenience, slashes special congestion, historic action to combat the climate crisis, and lowers energy costs and advances energy security. Again, it does what we want to do to fight inflation by lowering costs. Fully paid for and no new taxes, as President Biden has said, for families making $100 to $100,000. I talked with a great enthusiasm and excitement about the advancement we're making with preparing legislation, passing legislation, and the rest as we speak here right now on the floor of addressing drought and fires, and as a California, as a Westerner, this is very, very important legislation for everyone in our country, particularly who benefited from the intellectual resource that our Western members are in this. But we had a sad thing happen, and that was when the Senate failed to pass the PACT Act. How do you explain how 80% of the Republicans in the United States Senate said no to our veterans? Every time, last week I had my regular meeting with the veteran service organizations, and I always promise them, and we try to honor that promise by acting always in a bipartisan way, so they don't have to get involved in our decision. We have our differences of opinion as to allocation of resources, but we do so in the most bipartisan way. And the PAC Act is a very bipartisan way. 80-some senators voted for it the first time it came on the floor there. That they would vote against that when people are waiting, people are dying, people are sick because they were exposed to these burn pits, huge burn pits. If you don't know about them, read about them because they're deadly. In addition to which, if you live in North Carolina or served at Capital June and anyone in your family, you will know that the water there is deadly. And not only for the service member, but for their families when they live there with them. And that is covered in the legislation. So for them to say, well, we're not going to vote for it because we've come to an agreement on the reconciliation, as what they were calling it. It's so ridiculous. Wait a minute. You're not going to help our veterans because we want to lower the cost of prescription drugs, because we want to lower the cost of health care, because we want to protect the planet. Of course, you don't agree with them because then, but would you use that to vote against our veterans? It's really immoral, almost criminal, because these people were exposed and you know, I've been on this issue since Agent Orange for a long time. And the sooner that we can do this, the healthier our veterans will be. As I said yesterday in my rally, when in the military we say on the battlefield we leave no soldier behind, and when they come home we leave no veteran behind. But the Republicans in the Senate did just that by 80% of them voting no. Isn't that unbelievable? And actually, when the bill passed in the Senate the first time, it had 84 votes. People over politics, when there were our Democratic Communications and Policy, Democratic Policy and Communications Committee put forth an agenda for the people agenda. People over politics, we were very excited about that. It too has three things: lower cost, again, safer communities, and better jobs, and that's what we are about. In any event, it's a comparison to what the Republicans are doing, in contrast with MAGA Republicans are criminalizing women's health care, funding and Social Security and Medicare. Don't take it from me. Read their stuff, attacking democracy, undermining the right to vote. So we think we have a clear contrast in terms of why we are here, what our life is, and how we go forward. Any questions?
Speaker Pelosi.
Okay. Since we talked baseball last night.
We talked baseball last night. We'll talk policy and legislation today. So on this reconciliation package, it seems as though, you have a push to try to get something done before August here. There might be problems getting this through the Senate. Do you feel like some of your members might say, here we are, we're on the hook again, if they can't get this through the Senate, even though Senator Manchin is on board, but there's other issues there, and also just having the numbers to pass the bill for COVID, and how does that translate to winning in November?
So you want to talk politics?
Well, but obviously you're making the space to the Democrats.
Our purpose is to meet the needs of the American people. You have to talk to the Senate about the dynamic over there in regard to this bill. It is, shall we say, not everything that I want. I mean, not even close, not even half. But nonetheless, what is in there is very good. Historic. First time HHS Secretary can negotiate for lower prescription drug prices. Not as big as I would like, but it's in the door. Historic. In terms of not the three-year extension of the subsidies, the Affordable Care Act, the strength of the Affordable Care Act. Fabulous. And, by the way, I want more. That is to say, I want the Medicaid piece and the rest of that. But that doesn't mean we don't support the bill. But probably the biggest difference, although those are substantial for a kitchen table issue, is what it does in terms of climate. You may recall that when I was speaker the first time, climate was my flagship issue. And We could establish a committee, we pass legislation, all of that. So this is of the highest importance because it's about the children, it's about the future. It is a short fuse that we're on. The thermal management of the planet is greatly at risk. The rising sea levels, the encroachment of deserts, so many things that are happening in communities that have to move. So it's a health issue, clean air, clean water. It's a economic issue, preeminence in green technologies in the world. It's a security issue because the encroachment of all of these impacts of the climate crisis cause competition and conflict over resources and habitat. And the national security people come into us and say this is a security issue, and of course it's a values issue. So this for us, when I learned of what was in there, was just transformational. We've never spent this much money in this much as we had originally. We've never invested this much in such an important way, in a public-private way, to have the private sector play its role in this so we get more advantage than is just right there. So it was beautiful to behold, and I feel pretty confident.
But you don't think that you're stringing people along again if they start, you said you can't worry about the Senate. The Senate's going to do what it's going to do.
Yeah, and when they send it to us, we'll pass it.
But you're confident that's going to happen?
Yes.
They're going to get it?
Yeah.
Madam Speaker,
on the police funding bill, I realize that Democrats continue to now say that we actually fund the police, but the thing that this will be contingent upon certain accountability measures. Are we talking about consent decrees? Are we talking about DEI measures or anti-bias training? Can't the Republicans just turn around and say, hey, you're only going to get your funding over these police departments if you go by what the Democrats want you to actually go by, such as their policy agendas? That's not real police funding. That's by saying, you do this,
No, it's real
and you'll get
police
your money.
funding. It's police funding with accountability.
So like consent decrees and like anti-bias
We're very
training?
proud of the compromises that were made, and with much discussion on the other side of the aisle and people outside. So that's what I have to say about that.
Madam Speaker,
Madam Speaker, confident you'll get the assault weapons ban through today? You are.
Madam Speaker,
You've repeatedly said that you want Republicans to take back their party. You said in May, quote, "Here I am, Nancy Pelosi, saying this country needs a strong Republican Party, not a cult." How does that square with your party now spending money to boost election-denying candidates in Republican primaries, including against House Republicans who voted to impeach President Trump?
I said that we need a strong Republican Party, not a cult of personality. That didn't mean we shouldn't have a strong Democratic Party as well. And the political decisions that are made out there are made in furtherance of our winning the election, because we think the contrast between Democrats and Republicans as they are now is so drastic that we have to win. And I feel confident win. I just see, what's that called? It's 44 to vote. George has it. The most recent poll that came out has us 44 to 38. This whole thing has changed. But make no mistake, I said to you, we have every intention of winning this election. And people make judgments in campaigns around the country about that, but it has nothing to do with whether we should have a strong, grand old party which has done great things.
Madam Speaker, just really quickly, I know you don't want to talk about your travel, but can you at least talk about the significance of visiting Asia? What type of message you and a congressional delegation would want to send if you, in fact, make this trip?
Well, I don't ever talk about my travel because, as some of you know, it's a security issue. It's a security issue for every member of Congress traveling, especially abroad, but for the Speaker, it is an additional security issue, and for those traveling with me, not just members, but staff, etc. The President earlier in his term talked about a strong emphasis on the Asian Pacific. He has visited there, the Vice President visited there, the Secretary of Commerce and others, and we want the Congress of the United States to be part of that initiative. Of course, as a West Coast person, we see the Pacific as that's our home. We're part of that as well. That is not to diminish the importance of our transatlantic relationships as well. But I'm very excited that should we go to the countries that you'll be hearing about along the way about how the conversations go. Now, earlier this year, a couple months ago, we had 9 leaders of the ASEAN, Southeast Asian countries, and at the House. It was bipartisan. In fact, we invited some of the Senate to come, and some participated to have a conversation, hear their presentations, and another symbol. The president had that ASEAN meeting in Washington, D.C., and we were very much a part of it. So again, we have global responsibility, whether it comes to 3 things, I would say: security, economy, and governance. And this will be part of it.
President Xi told Biden to play with fire. Are you leaving tonight, Madam Speaker?
You told me last night there was going to be a comeback in the ballgame. What happened? You said it ain't over till it's over. It's over. So
This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.